My husband cheated with my sister for years, so I waited until her wedding day to expose their secret and shatter their perfect world. My name's Natalie. I'm 31, and 6 months ago, my life pretty much fell apart. I found out my husband of 7 years, Daniel, was having an affair with my younger sister, Fiona. Yeah, you read that right. My sister. It still feels unreal, even typing it out. Looking back now, I guess there were signs I just didn't want to see. Daniel and I met in college. He was charming, funny, and one of those people who could light up a room. We got married a few years after graduation, and things were great, at least for a while. Our lives weren't super exciting or anything. We both worked full-time. He's in marketing and I'm a graphic designer. And we spent most evenings at home watching TV or cooking dinner together. Weekends were for errands or little day trips. Nothing fancy, just the kind of life I thought we both wanted. Fiona and I had always been close. She's the bubbly, outgoing one in the family, the type of person who can make friends with a stranger in 5 minutes. Growing up, she was like my shadow, always following me around, and as adults, I felt like we were more like best friends than just sisters. She's a wedding planner, which suits her personality perfectly. She's always been good at making people feel special and keeping everything running smoothly. When Daniel and I got married, she helped plan our wedding, and I was so thankful to have her by my side. I never imagined she'd betray me like this. There were definitely signs that something wasn't right in my marriage. It started small, little changes in Daniel's behavior that I brushed off at first. He started working late more often, claiming he had big projects to finish. He'd always been busy with work, but now it felt like he was putting in extra hours every week. When I asked him about it, he'd say something like, "You know how it is, clients are demanding." And I believed him, because why wouldn't I? Then there was his phone. Daniel's always been a bit protective of his gadgets, but it got weird. He started keeping his phone face down on the table all the time, and taking it with him everywhere, even to the bathroom. One time I jokingly asked him, "What's with the secrecy? You hiding state secrets or something?" He laughed it off and said, "I just don't want it to get scratched." That didn't even make sense, but I let it go.
The changes didn't stop there. He started paying way more attention to his appearance. Daniel's never been one to fuss about how he looks. He's the kind of guy who throws on whatever's clean and doesn't think twice. But suddenly, he was buying new clothes, trying out skincare products, and even going for morning jogs. He claimed he wanted to be healthier, but it felt off. It wasn't like him. Fiona was the one I turned to when I started feeling uneasy. I told her about how distant Daniel had been and how I felt like something was missing between us. She always reassured me. "Don't overthink it, Nat," she'd say. "Every couple goes through this kind of phase." I believed her because she was my sister, and she always knew the right thing to say. I'll admit, I started second-guessing myself a lot during that time. Was I imagining things? Was I being too sensitive? It's hard to explain, but when you're in a situation like this, you start doubting your own instincts. I didn't want to be the paranoid wife who jumps to conclusions over every little thing, so I tried to push those feelings aside. And then, there was the night I walked into the kitchen and found him typing something on his phone, smiling at the screen. When he saw me, he immediately put the phone down and said, "Hey, what's up?" like nothing had happened. Another time, he canceled plans for our date night, saying he had to go to an emergency meeting with a client. I'd spent hours getting ready, even putting on makeup and a dress, which I don't usually bother with. When he called to cancel, I tried to sound understanding, but inside I was crushed. It felt like I didn't matter anymore. The worst part? Fiona would always back him up. She'd tell me I was overthinking things or that I needed to be more supportive of his work. I remember telling her once, "I just feel like something's off with him lately." And she replied, "You're reading too much into it, Nat. He loves you. You two are great together." Hearing that from her always calmed me down, even though deep down, I felt like something wasn't right. It's crazy to think about now, but there were times when I actually felt guilty for doubting him. I'd think, maybe I'm being unfair. Maybe I'm just stressed out and it's affecting how I see things. I guess that's what makes this whole thing hurt so much. I trusted them both completely. I never thought in a million years that my sister, the person who had been there for me through everything, and my husband, the man I planned to spend the rest of my life with, would betray me like this.
I still don't know why I didn't dig deeper sooner. Maybe I didn't want to know the truth. Maybe I was scared of what I'd find. All I know is that I spent months walking around with this uneasy feeling, trying to convince myself that everything was fine when it was anything but. So, after months of brushing off my gut feelings, something finally snapped. It wasn't one big moment or some dramatic confrontation. It was more like a slow build of little things I couldn't ignore anymore. I'd started noticing how often Daniel's phone was lighting up with notifications at odd times, but it wasn't until one specific night that I decided to stop second-guessing myself. We were sitting on the couch watching a show. I don't even remember what it was because I was distracted the whole time. Daniel had his phone in his hand, like always, and I noticed he was smiling at something. It wasn't just a normal smile, though. It was this soft, almost affectionate look. I asked, "What's so funny?" trying to keep my tone light, but he immediately locked the screen and said, "Oh, nothing, just some dumb work thing." That response didn't sit right with me. Work texts don't usually make you smile like that. I let it go in the moment because I didn't want to start an argument, but that was when I decided I couldn't just keep ignoring this anymore. I needed to know what was really going on. That night, after Daniel went to bed, I sat in the living room with my mind racing. I kept thinking about his behavior, about how distant he'd been lately, and how Fiona always seemed to brush off my concerns whenever I talked to her. My stomach was in knots because a part of me already knew what I was going to find. I just didn't want to believe it. I remembered something Daniel and I had done a few years ago when we were setting up a new phone for him. We had linked our Apple IDs for convenience so we could share apps, music, and stuff like that. I hadn't thought about it in years, but sitting there on the couch, it hit me. I could still use that link to check his activity. I grabbed my phone. I needed answers. I opened the settings and relinked his account to my phone. The first thing I saw was his iMessage. My heart started pounding as I scrolled through his recent chats, and there it was, a conversation with Fiona. At first it looked innocent. Lots of short messages about family stuff, planning dinners, and general chit-chat. But as I scrolled back further, the tone changed. There were inside jokes I didn't understand. Late-night, good-night texts. I kept scrolling, feeling more and more sick with every message I read.
And then I saw a photo. It wasn't anything explicit, but it was a picture of Fiona wearing a sweater I recognized. It was Daniel's sweater, one he wore all the time around the house. The caption said, "Stole this from you, hope you don't mind." I stared at that photo for what felt like forever. I didn't even know how to process it. I wanted to wake him up right then and there, scream at him, demand an explanation, but something stopped me. I think it was the realization that this wasn't just a random one-off thing. If they were this comfortable, this casual about it, it had to be deeper than I'd thought. Instead of confronting him, I decided to dig deeper. I knew if I wanted the full story, I had to be smart about it. I started going through his other apps. That's when I found their WhatsApp chats. Unlike the iMessage, these weren't casual at all. They were long, detailed conversations, plans to meet up, discussions about how to keep things hidden from me and Fiona's fiancé, Alex. They even joked about me being too trusting. One message stood out. It was from Fiona, and it said, "She's working late tomorrow, right? You can come over then. I'll make your favorite." I felt like I couldn't breathe. My own sister, someone I trusted completely, was orchestrating this whole thing behind my back. I took screenshots of everything and sent them to myself. I didn't even know what I was going to do with them yet, but I knew I needed to have proof. Over the next few days, I kept checking his messages, watching their conversations unfold in real time. It was like living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. They weren't even trying to be careful. There were messages about hotels they'd stayed at, dinners they'd had together, and even jokes about how Alex and I were so clueless. One time, Fiona sent a picture of lingerie she'd bought and said, "Can't wait to wear this next time I see you." Daniel replied, "You look beautiful in it." It was like they were living in their own little world, completely detached from the reality of what they were doing to me and Alex. The hardest part was pretending everything was normal. While I was collecting all this evidence, I still had to go to family dinners, smile at Fiona, and act like the loving wife to Daniel. Every time I looked at them, I felt like I was going to explode. I'd catch little moments, like the way Fiona would touch Daniel's arm when she laughed, or how they'd exchange quick glances when they thought no one was looking. I don't know how I didn't lose it right then and there.
One night, while Daniel was in the shower, I synced his calendar to my phone. That's when I found out about all the times they'd met up without me knowing. Client meeting, gym session, work event. All of it was code for them sneaking around together. They even had specific days marked off where they'd planned entire weekends together. I felt like I was unraveling. How could they have done this for so long without me noticing? How could I have been so blind? But instead of confronting them, I kept quiet. I needed more. For now, I'll just say that watching them act like nothing was wrong, like they weren't betraying two people who trusted them, was one of the hardest things I've ever had to endure. Writing this down is kind of cathartic. I'll post more soon, but thanks for reading if you've made it this far. I want to tell you about an event that happened a little before everything came to light. It was one of those moments where I had to hold myself together, even though the betrayal was staring me right in the face. It was so surreal that I still get angry thinking about it. Fiona, being the social butterfly that she is, had organized a charity fun run in town. It was something she'd been planning for months, and the proceeds were going to a local children's hospital. She'd been talking about it non-stop, and since it was for a good cause, I decided to take part. Daniel was weirdly enthusiastic about it too, which felt off because, let's be real, he's not the get up early and run for charity type of guy. But he signed up and said it would be a good way to spend time together as a family. If I didn't know what I knew, I probably would have thought it was sweet. The day of the event was sunny and warm, and there were people everywhere. Families, couples, kids with their faces painted. Fiona was in her element, running around in her event organizer t-shirt, holding a clipboard and making sure everything was running smoothly. She looked so normal, like the perfect bubbly little sister everyone loved. Watching her joke with volunteers and give heartfelt speeches made me want to scream. How could she be so fake? Daniel, of course, was right by her side, helping set up tents and hand out water bottles like he was Mr. Charitable. I wanted to believe it was just because he was being supportive, but I knew better. Every time he talked to Fiona, he'd lower his voice slightly, or they'd exchange these quick little glances when they thought no one was looking. It was subtle, but once you're aware of something, you can't unsee it. The run itself was a 5-kilometer event, and since I'm not much of a runner, I stayed toward the back of the group. Daniel and Fiona, on the other hand, took off like they were in a race to the finish line. I kept an eye on them from a distance, and sure enough, they stuck close to each other the whole time. At one point, I saw Fiona laugh at something Daniel said, and she playfully shoved his arm. It was the kind of thing you'd expect to see from a couple, not a brother-in-law and sister-in-law. What really pissed me off was how blatant they were about it. They didn't even seem worried about how it might look to other people. To them, this was just another day in their little secret world. Meanwhile, I was stuck in this surreal nightmare, smiling and pretending like everything was fine. After the run, there was a little closing ceremony where Fiona handed out awards for the fastest runners and the biggest fundraisers. She even got up on stage to give a short speech about how proud she was of the community for coming together. This event wouldn't have been possible without the support of my family and friends, she said, glancing at Daniel. My stomach turned. How dare she stand up there and act like she was some shining example of goodness when she'd been sneaking around behind my back for years? As people started gathering for group photos, I hung back and pulled out my phone. By this point, I'd gotten into the habit of checking Daniel and Fiona's linked WhatsApp messages whenever I could. I scrolled through their conversation from earlier that morning and felt my blood boil. Fiona, you ready for today? I can't wait to see you in your running gear. Daniel, anything for you. I'll stay close so we can keep each other motivated. There were more messages too. Things like, you're amazing for organizing this. I'm so proud of you. And I'll meet you near the water station after the run. It was like they couldn't even go a few hours without feeding into their little fantasy. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab the microphone from Fiona and tell everyone the truth right then and there. But I didn't. I couldn't. I knew it wasn't the right time, and I wasn't ready yet. So instead, I shoved my phone back into my pocket, plastered on a fake smile, and joined the group for photos. Fiona pulled me into a hug for one of the pictures, and all I could think about was how badly I wanted to push her away.
Later, during the post-run refreshments, I noticed Daniel and Fiona standing off to the side, talking quietly. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but they were smiling, like they didn't have a care in the world. I watched as Fiona reached out and adjusted Daniel's race bib, her hand lingering a little too long on his chest. It was so blatant, I felt like I was going to explode. Did they think I was stupid? Did they think I wouldn't notice? When Daniel came over to me a few minutes later, I forced myself to act normal. "Good run," he said, leaning down to kiss my forehead. The gesture felt so fake it made my skin crawl. "Yeah, you and Fiona seem to have a good time too," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. He just smiled and said, "She was great, wasn't she? She worked so hard on this event." I wanted to scream. "Of course she did, Daniel. She worked so hard at everything, including ruining our marriage." The rest of the day was a blur. I spent most of it keeping myself busy, helping Fiona clean up and chatting with other volunteers. I didn't trust myself to be around Daniel and Fiona for too long, because I knew I'd say something I wasn't ready to reveal yet. At one point, Fiona came over and thanked me for coming. "It means so much to me that you were here," she said, looking at me with those big fake eyes. I smiled back and said, "Of course, anything for you." The words tasted like poison. By the end of the day, I was emotionally drained. Watching them together, seeing how they acted like everything was fine, was exhausting. But it also fueled me. If they thought they could keep getting away with this, they were dead wrong. Fiona's wedding to Alex was coming up in a few weeks, and I realized it was the perfect opportunity to expose them. To set the stage, Fiona's wedding was a big deal. She'd been planning it for months, and since she's a wedding planner by trade, she went all out. It was at this beautiful outdoor venue, white tents, fairy lights, the whole picture-perfect vibe. Everyone was there, family, friends, co-workers, even some of Alex's extended family who'd flown in from out of state. The pressure to make the day flawless was high, and I was right in the middle of it, as her maid of honor. In the days leading up to the wedding, I'd gone back and forth about how I wanted to handle things. I knew I couldn't just sit through the ceremony and pretend everything was fine. The idea of Fiona and Daniel standing there smiling and laughing like they hadn't spent the last 2 years betraying me was more than I could take. But I also didn't want to cause a scene just for the sake of it. I wanted to make sure the truth came out in a way they couldn't deny or talk their way out of. On the morning of the wedding, I woke up with a strange sense of calm. I'd spent the past month preparing everything I needed, going over it all in my head again and again. I had the screenshots, the messages, the photos, everything neatly saved and organized on my phone. I didn't know exactly how the day would unfold, but I was ready for whatever came my way. The first part of the day went about as you'd expect. I helped Fiona get ready, making sure her dress looked perfect and that her makeup was on point. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, standing there and acting like the supportive sister while she gushed about how excited she was to marry Alex. At one point, she even grabbed my hands and said, "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Nat. You're the best sister anyone could ever ask for." I wanted to laugh in her face, but instead, I just smiled and said, "Anything for you." Daniel showed up about an hour before the ceremony, looking sharp in his suit. When he saw me, he gave me this warm, affectionate smile, like we were still the happy couple everyone thought we were. It made my stomach turn. He spent most of the pre-ceremony time hovering around Fiona, checking on little details and making sure she had everything she needed. To anyone else, it probably looked like he was just being a good brother-in-law, but I knew better. The ceremony itself was beautiful, I'll give them that. Fiona looked stunning in her dress, and Alex couldn't stop smiling as she walked down the aisle. For a brief moment, I felt this pang of guilt, like maybe I was about to ruin something that didn't need to be ruined. But then I remembered all the lies, the sneaking around, the nights I spent crying while they carried on like nothing was wrong. That guilt disappeared real quick. When the reception started, I knew my moment was coming. As maid of honor, I was expected to give a speech. It was the perfect opportunity, and I wasn't going to waste it. I'd spent weeks thinking about what I wanted to say and how I wanted to say it. My goal wasn't just to expose them. It was to make sure everyone knew exactly who they were and what they'd done. When it was time for the speeches, I stood up with my glass of sparkling cider and took a deep breath. The room was quiet, all eyes on me. Fiona was sitting at the head table with Alex, looking radiant and completely oblivious to what was about to happen. Daniel was a few seats away, watching me with a proud smile that made me want to throw my drink in his face. "I'd like to start by thanking everyone for being here today," I began, keeping my tone light and cheerful. "Fiona and Alex, this day is absolutely beautiful, and it's clear how much love and effort you've both put into making it perfect." There were murmurs of agreement from the crowd, and I could see Fiona beaming, probably thinking this was going to be some sweet, sappy tribute. She had no idea what was coming. As Fiona's sister, I've had the privilege of watching her grow into the amazing woman she is today, and as her maid of honor, I've had the honor of helping her plan this incredible celebration of love. I paused, letting the silence hang in the air for a moment. "But what I've also had," I said, my voice steady as I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, "is a front row seat to a very different side of the story." The room went dead silent. Fiona's face froze on her face, and I could see Daniel shifting uncomfortably in his seat. I unlocked my phone and pulled up a file I'd saved, a message thread between Fiona and Daniel. I held it up for everyone to see. "Over the past few months, I've discovered some things about Fiona and my husband, Daniel. Things that go far beyond what anyone here would expect. Like this message from Fiona to Daniel sent 2 nights ago. 'Can't wait to see you tomorrow. You'll always be my favorite.'" Gasps echoed around the room, and I could hear people whispering. Fiona tried to stand up, her face pale, but Alex reached out and grabbed her arm, keeping her in her seat. Daniel started saying something, probably trying to stop me, but I held up a hand to silence him.
"Or this one," I said, scrolling to another screenshot. "She's working late on Thursday, so come over then. I'll make your favorite." I looked directly at Fiona as I added, "That was sent while I was at work, busting my ass to help pay for this wedding, by the way." At this point, the room was chaos. Fiona was crying, Daniel was trying to stand up and explain, and Alex looked like someone had just punched him in the stomach. He grabbed the phone from my hand and started scrolling through the messages himself. When he looked up at Fiona, his face was red with anger. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice shaking. Fiona didn't answer. She just sat there, tears streaming down her face while the entire room stared at her. I could have said more. I could have gone on for hours about all the things I'd uncovered, but I didn't need to. The truth was out, and there was no way for them to talk their way out of it. I stepped away from the microphone and walked out of the room, leaving the chaos behind me. I went straight home. I didn't want to stick around to see the fallout or hear excuses. My phone was blowing up with texts and calls from family members, but I ignored most of them. I needed time to process everything. I'd spent so much energy preparing for that moment that I didn't even think about what came next. All I knew was that there was no going back. I got a text from my cousin Jenna, who stayed at the reception to see how it all played out. Her words, not mine. Apparently, as soon as I walked out, Alex lost it. He confronted Fiona in front of everyone, demanding to know how long it had been going on. When she couldn't give him a straight answer, he threw down his napkin, said something like, "You disgust me," and walked out. Jenna said she'd never seen a groom leave his own wedding like that before.
Daniel tried to chase after me, but Jenna and a couple of my other cousins stopped him. "You've done enough," she told him. She said he looked like he wanted to argue, but ended up just standing there like an idiot while everyone stared at him. Fiona was crying hysterically, but no one really went to comfort her. Even her closest friends were too shocked to say anything. By the end of the night, the guests started leaving, and the whole event just fizzled out. Alex's family was furious. They'd paid for most of the wedding, and now their son's marriage had ended before it even started. They packed up their stuff and left the venue without saying a word to Fiona or her side of the family. The next day, I filed for divorce. I'd been sitting on those papers for weeks, just waiting for the right moment. Daniel came home that evening looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. He didn't even try to deny anything. He just sat on the couch and said, "I guess you're done with me now." I didn't even bother responding. I handed him the papers and said, "Sign these, and then you can pack your stuff and leave." He tried to apologize, but I shut him down. "You don't get to apologize," I told him. "You've had years to think about what you were doing. It's too late now." Daniel moved out that weekend, and from what I heard, he ended up back at his parents' house. It didn't take long for his professional life to fall apart too. He worked as a marketing director for a mid-sized company, and while I didn't think his personal life would affect his job, I underestimated how fast news travels. One of the wedding guests had filmed part of my speech, of course they did, and shared it online. It didn't go viral or anything, but it made the rounds in our social circles. And eventually, someone from his company saw it. The company's CEO, Clara, is a strong, no-nonsense woman who doesn't tolerate any kind of drama. She'd always been a big advocate for women in the workplace, and apparently when she found out what Daniel had done, she was disgusted. According to a mutual friend, she called him into her office and said something along the lines of, "I can't have someone with your lack of integrity representing this company." She gave him the option to resign or be fired, and he chose to resign. Good riddance. As for Fiona, her fall from grace was just as dramatic. Her wedding planning business relied heavily on her reputation and word of mouth. Once people found out what she'd done, clients started canceling their bookings left and right. A few of them even demanded refunds, which she couldn't afford to give because she'd already spent most of the money. Within a month, she had to close her business entirely. No one wanted to hire a wedding planner who destroyed her own sister's marriage. The irony isn't lost on me. Fiona tried to reach out to me a couple of times after everything went down. She sent these long, emotional texts about how sorry she was and how she never meant for it to happen. One message said, "I don't know how I let it go this far. I hate myself for what I've done to you." I didn't respond. I didn't have the energy or the desire to hear her excuses. She made her choices, and now she had to live with them. My parents, on the other hand, didn't take sides as clearly as I would have liked. My mom kept trying to fix things between Fiona and me, saying things like, "She's still your sister and you'll regret cutting her out of your life." I told her straight up that some betrayals are too big to come back from. My dad, to his credit, was angrier. He told Fiona she'd brought shame on the family and said he couldn't even look at her right now. that was probably the closest thing to support I got from either of them. Alex and I didn't talk much in the weeks following the wedding, but I did hear through mutual friends that he was planning to press charges against Fiona. Apparently his family had spent thousands on the wedding, and he wasn't about to let her walk away with all the gifts and money people had given them. I don't know the exact details, but I heard he filed for an annulment and was working with a lawyer to get back everything he could. One thing that surprised me was how much support I got from friends and even acquaintances. People I hadn't talked to in years reached out to check on me after hearing what happened. A few of them even said they had bad experiences with Fiona in the past, but never thought she was capable of something like this. It was strange, but it helped to know I wasn't as alone as I felt. A lot has happened, but I'm finally at a place where I can breathe again. So, here's where things stand now. First, let's get the Fiona and Daniel drama out of the way, because honestly, I'm tired of thinking about them. After everything went down, Fiona moved to another state. I'm not exactly sure where because I've blocked her on everything, but from what I've heard through family gossip, she's working as a receptionist at some small office. It's a far cry from her wedding planner glory days, but I guess that's what happens when you burn all your bridges.
My parents are still struggling with the whole situation. My mom can't seem to accept that Fiona and I are never going to have a relationship again. She keeps trying to guilt me with lines like, "You were so close growing up," or "Family is family no matter what." My dad, thankfully, has been more understanding. He hasn't spoken to Fiona since the wedding and says he doesn't know if he ever will. It's been hard on them, but at the end of the day, this isn't my mess to fix. As for Daniel, his fall from grace has been nothing short of spectacular. After Clara, his former boss, basically kicked him out of the company, he tried to get a job at a smaller firm. Apparently, his reputation followed him because no one wanted to touch him. I heard he's been freelancing to make ends meet, but it's not going well. He's living in his parents' basement now, and from what I've gathered, they're not exactly thrilled about it. It's funny. He spent so much time trying to impress people, and now he's back where he started with nothing to show for it. Anyway, enough about them. Let's talk about me. The first few months after everything happened were tough. I felt like I was constantly swinging between anger, sadness, and just plain exhaustion. I moved into a new apartment downtown, a small one-bedroom with big windows and lots of light. It's not fancy, but it's a fresh start. I got rid of almost everything that reminded me of Daniel, which was more satisfying than I expected. There's something so freeing about creating a space that's entirely your own. Work became my sanctuary. I started taking on more projects, diving into things I'd been putting off for years. My boss noticed and even offered me a promotion, which felt amazing. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over something in my life. It wasn't just about staying busy, it was about proving to myself that I could thrive on my own. Then there's Alex. I wasn't sure if we'd stay in touch after the wedding, but somehow we did. It started with a few casual texts, checking in, sharing updates about the fallout, that sort of thing. We bonded over our shared misery. But it wasn't just that. We also made each other laugh, which felt like a lifeline during such a dark time.
Our first real meetup was at a coffee shop near my apartment. We sat there for hours, talking about everything from our favorite movies to the dumb mistakes we made in our 20s. It was easy, in a way I hadn't felt in years. There were no pretenses, just two people who understood each other in a way that most people couldn't. Over time, those coffee meetups turned into dinners, and dinners turned into something more. We've been dating for a couple of months now, and I'll be honest, it's scary. Trust doesn't come easily after what we've both been through, but Alex gets it. He doesn't push me to open up when I'm not ready, and I do the same for him. We're taking things slow, and for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful about the future. One of the most unexpectedly healing moments was when Alex and I went to a park for a picnic. It was the same park where Daniel and I used to go for walks, and I'd been avoiding it for months. But being there with Alex felt different.
like I was reclaiming something that had been taken from me. We sat on a blanket, eating sandwiches and laughing about the most random things, and I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I'm not saying I've forgiven Fiona or Daniel, but I've let go of the bitterness. They're not worth my energy. Therapy has helped too. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go at first. It felt a little too self-help book for me. But it's been a game changer. My therapist has helped me work through the guilt, the anger, and all the messy emotions that come with being betrayed by the people you trusted most. I've learned that it's okay to set boundaries, to cut people out when they're toxic, and to put myself first for once.
Looking back, I think the biggest lesson I've learned is that healing isn't linear. Some days I feel like I'm on top of the world, and other days I'll see something that reminds me of the past and it'll knock me down for a bit. But that's okay. The important thing is that I keep moving forward. So, where does that leave me now? Honestly, I'm in a good place. My life isn't perfect, but it feels like mine again. I've got a new apartment, a job I love, and a relationship that's built on trust and mutual respect. I've even started thinking about traveling, something I've always wanted to do but never made time for. Maybe I'll go to Italy or Japan next year. Who knows? To anyone reading this who's going through something similar, I just want to say you're stronger than you think. It's gonna hurt and it's gonna suck, but you'll get through it. And when you do, you'll realize just how much you're capable of. Don't let anyone tell you how to feel or how to heal. Take your time and don't be afraid to put yourself first.